Hey guys, you're listening to the Simple Electronics Podcast, Episode 1. I am Simple Electronics, your host, and today I have someone pretty special for episode number 1. I know him as Junk from work, as should you. Junk, how are you?
Fantastic. I am extremely excited to be here and a little bit nervous, not going to lie. I have to say, this is my first podcast. And I can't think of a better Sherpa to guide me through this whole experience than Simple Electronics.
So I guess it's the blind leading the blind today.
Exactly. And I didn't want anybody too experienced, obviously, because I don't want to look like a fool. So we'll fumble through it together.
Yeah, I guess we both should set the expectations then.
You got to set them low. That's the thing. That's the only way you can beat them.
Well, I think my viewers know a little bit about me. How about you tell them a little bit about you?
Sure. I guess I have a YouTube channel called Junk from Work, and I talk about tools, and I'm a mechanic by trade, or almost by trade, I guess. And I talk a little bit about my experiences on the job, at work, and everything that's kind of involved with that. And I also enjoy electronics as well.
And that is what brings you here, because I have a background in mechanics. I call it technicians.
Fair enough.
I work in a dealership. A little bit of rubbing some dust off my shoulders there.
Hell yeah, yeah.
But I think you're selling yourself a little bit short, because you're a mechanic apprentice. But
Yes.
you've gone from one shop to another, so you have a few different experiences there. You have actually more diverse industry experience than I do.
I didn't realize. So your whole career was in a dealership.
It absolutely was.
Oh,
I've
fantastic.
learned from the bottom up,
Yeah.
just straight from the source.
That's really, like being in the dealership environment, you almost need to get in early because the learning curve, not even so much for the actual work, but for the behind the scenes stuff, the workflow, the dealing with warranty, that type of stuff. It's quite complex. Like I find the work to be a lot more straightforward than the independent shop, because you're dealing with the same product lines and you're seeing a lot of the same faults. But the other things, the warranty and dealing with the parts department and all of the things that go along with it, is what makes the dealership have its own little set of challenges.
Oh, absolutely. And it's a good thing and it's a bad thing, because in one sense, yeah, I know the product better than pretty much anybody. I've been working there for like 14 years or so.
14 years. Wow.
Yeah, almost
That's
14
unreal.
years. Yeah.
Jeez.
And so I can diagnose a lot of the cars from the tower. For those of you who don't know, the tower is where sort of like the jobs are assigned to the technicians. So I grab a work order. I can read the customer's description if the advisor did their job properly, which is another story. Then I can typically diagnose it right there on the spot. I know, at least to 2 or 3 possibilities maximum what it could be.
It definitely is nice to be able to have that direction. That was the one thing with the independent shop, is you're moving from product line to product line, and automotive, like actually working on vehicles, was a fairly small portion of what we did at the other shop. So, one day I'd be working on a boat. Next day, I'd be working on an RV. We did a lot of road signs. So, solar powered systems, and they have their own little, OS and everything that goes along with that. And then, I'd be diagnosing a vehicle the next day. So it definitely is nice to be able to be in that dealership environment, get into the groove, run your TSBs, talk to a few guys that have seen it and been around for 14 years like yourself. It definitely makes the diagnostic a lot more straightforward and guided, as opposed to the independent shop.
Just for those that don't know, TSB means Technical Service Bulletin. It's just basically when a manufacturer knows that there's a common defect, because the manufacturer is on the hook for fixing those cars in the warranty period. They release these service bulletins, so it makes our job as technicians a lot quicker, because typically if you have a problem, the first thing you're supposed to do is check for the technical service bulletins if the car is under warranty, because it'll save you time, which then saves the manufacturer money. And if you've worked for a manufacturer long enough, you know that that's basically their number one goal is to,
That's all they care about is
yeah,
is those dollars.
exactly, pay you as little as possible. It's just
Exactly.
interesting too because as a technician, I'm the only part of the manufacturer's organization that costs them money. The sales
I never really
department,
considered that. Yeah.
yeah, the sales department, that's their bread and butter. If the cars don't leave the lot, the manufacturer doesn't make money. The service department, even like the advisors and whatever, they deliver a customer experience to the customer that makes them want to
Mhm.
come into the dealership and buy Honda, in my case, Honda parts. But
Mhm.
but for me, I'm the one, mopping up their loose ends, and they have to pay me a flat rate wage in order to do that. And if my job is complex, I'm going to charge them more.
Yeah. It's an interesting. In a way, I feel like we're really diving deep into the automotive side of it. I feel like sometimes mechanics tend to get a little bit of tunnel vision, especially automotive mechanics. But um, it's interesting seeing the politics of the dealership. Like I'm not on a flat rate dealership. Like we get paid hourly, which is nice. I don't think I could ever work under the flat rate system. But it's so weird to see, like the way that uh, parts will. I don't want to. What's the word? Prioritize something. Like how fast a certain department moves versus basically a mechanic who's essentially, especially in your case, an independent contractor in the back. The guys are in the back working like crazy trying to make their time, and then you have those different departments that you have to deal with that are on their own schedule, their own pay scale, and their own pace.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. So yeah, the technicians, they have to get the giddy up because customers are waiting.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I'm flat rate. I'm paid for the job. So an oil change will pay me, let's just say, a point 0.5 of an hour. If it takes an hour or if it takes 10 minutes, I'm still paid the exact same. But yeah, it's true. The rest of the dealership is typically more laid back. The advisors sometimes can get a little stressed, and the salespeople too, because their salespeople are commission only. But it
Yes.
doesn't matter if it takes the salesperson all day if they only have one customer that day anyway, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it is
Yeah.
different to have the crunch. But your mechanicking experience is actually really interesting for an electronics YouTube channel because I know on my part I became interested in electronics when the manufacturer stopped telling me what was happening inside those control modules. So when they would say, like, there should be a signal coming from this module, they would not tell me what the signal was. They would just say, test all the other things connected to the module, and if everything is good, then change the module. Has that been your experience at your dealership?
Yes and no. I think there's a technician that's been he literally started his career probably quite similar to yours, 18 years old, started working at this dealership. The guy is an absolute he's a wizard. Like he's unbelievable. I've never seen any like for fixing Fords, this guy is just unreal. And I think when you go through the pinpoint testing, like the manufacturer recommended testing procedure, yes, it's basically test everything around the component. If that's all good and you're still, you still have a fault, then it's the component, the module, whatever it may be. Um, I kind of I tend to gravitate towards guys that know more than me. What do they say? Steel sharpens steel, right? So I try and find those guys that are you can pick them out, right? Like the guys that have mountains of parts sitting in their bay and everything goes back together. They got no comebacks. They're just smooth as silk. It's effortless for them. And I started talking with him a little bit, and Ford does have actually a pretty good suite of diagnostic testing built into their scan tools. There is it's called the vehicle measurement module. So it's a signal generator, oscilloscope. It does noise, vibration, and harshness analyzation. You can balance drive shafts on vehicles. And it's one of those tools that is extremely powerful. Like every time I use it, I'm just blown away by how much functionality it has. And nobody uses it. The only person in the shop that uses it is this guy who's been around for 20 years fixing these Fords. And I found that it's almost like there is just a divide. There is the dealership guys that will basically parts till it starts type of thing. They'll get it right 9 times out of 10. And then there's guys like his name is Dave. I won't have to give him his last name, but there's guys like Dave that will actually go through and do the testing and physically look at waveforms or generate a signal back to a module to see if it's reading correctly. And that's more where I kind of try, at least, to gravitate towards as far as my diagnostic testing.
Nice. That's very nice. We have some tools. We have mainly their Panasonic Windows tablets,
Okay.
and we have USB and wireless VCI, vehicle communication interfaces.
Mhm.
But we don't have any waveform generating capabilities on those. It's
Oh, no
a
kidding.
Yeah, it's a two-way. I mean, it's bidirectional, so
Yeah.
you
Oh, yeah,
can
for sure.
command things on and off. But its biggest claim to fame is it's basically, I hesitate to use the word oscilloscope. It's more of a high-speed graphing multimeter. It's not as quick as an oscilloscope,
Yeah.
but you can do high-speed snapshots. So you can set up, basically you take your PIDs, so basically your data signals, and you can just rack them all up, and then you can tell the software, like, hey, when this signal goes high, I want all the signals I have on the screen to have a high resolution snapshot for like 2, 3, 4,
Mm.
5, 6 seconds or whatever. So it's kind of akin to an oscilloscope, but it is still interpreted by the module, right?
Yes.
So if, like, let's say you've got a wheel speed sensor, which works just like a Hall effect sensor, basically. So you get you got a high and a low going signal. You're relying on the interpretation of the control module. And so if you had a problem in one of the toothed wheel teeth, like let's say you had magnetic particles stuck to it,
Mhm.
and it only comes across half the time, you're going to see an intermittent failure, but it doesn't really tell you what the problem is. The reason I got into electronics is to understand what the heck that sensor is actually doing, and learning to sort of intercept the data before it gets calculated and modified by the control module. I feel like that's what's missing for a lot of young technicians these days.
It's so important because I just finished my 3rd year of technical training. Well, I didn't just finish it. I finished about 6 months ago, and it was our um, electronic diagnostic and CAN bus. Going through the actual nitty gritty, and I was quite surprised. Literally, nobody in the class. But I think we had about 12 people in our class had ever even hooked up an oscilloscope, let alone was familiar with the use of it. Even the teacher, because I have an oscilloscope more for playing with the Arduino stuff, and being at an independent shop, you really have to use an oscilloscope because you're using we had a snap-on scan tool, but it was bidirectional, but it was fairly generic because they're covering all the way from Volkswagen to Chevy. I mean, there's a huge gamut there, so you don't get the real fine functionality that you'd get with the dealership OE level tools. So we relied really heavily on the scope, and I was in class, and literally I was having the teacher getting me to set up labs for the rest of the class because he wasn't familiar with the use of a scope. And I think that's really doing a lot of detriment to our industry. I think that's so important to teach the electronics fundamentals to these techs coming up. I mean, you look at a modern vehicle, it's more computer than mechanical. You take away the semiconductors out of a modern vehicle, nothing's going on there, right? And they had another teacher that was a little bit more old school, and he came into class one day, and basically he was running down the use of scopes, and when do you ever see them being used in the industry, and they're slow and they take too long. And obviously I bit my tongue. I didn't say anything, but having that ability to, like you said, interpret raw data at least to me, as a tech who's uncomfortable of just, hey, okay, order parts and let's see if that works. That's such an important tool. It's really the only tool that you have a lot of times to definitively say, yes or no, as far as communication or whatever it may be. But the industry doesn't really seem to embrace it. It's unfortunate.
Well, I think so. For those of you that don't know, I do teach at a technical college part time, teach the automotive trade, and I am in charge of fuel and electrical and sort of emissions, as well as another teacher that I work with. So us two, we're a team. We kind of split the curriculum 50-50, but I'll tell you, even I think from the third week I see the students like in level 1. So basically, they've been doing oil changes and stuff for a few months, and then they get into my class. I have them playing with the oscilloscope, and the simple reason is that the number one complaint for learning electrical is that they say, "Oh, the mechanical part is physical. I can see it, I can touch it, I know what happens." But to me, the only actual like concrete thing is the electrical portion, because you have the tools to see it. I mean, how many times have you had a vehicle, let's say, with a shifting issue, and you can look at the solenoids and the valve body all you want, but you cannot test an automatic transmission
Yeah.
in use. Like it really, like you can take pressures and stuff, but it's not the same as looking at, let's say, the friction material left on the friction clutches. But in electrical, literally everything can be done live. And if the signal is too fast for you to see on a test light, you have a multimeter. If it's too fast for a multimeter, you have an oscilloscope. There's literally, like, you cannot put an inspection camera inside of an automatic transmission and watch
Exactly.
it go. To me, electrical is the only concrete thing, and I feel that it's a shame that manufacturers don't want to share the technical data of what's going on with the modules, so you have to go and learn on your own, right?
And that's exactly what it is. I don't know if it's, I mean, I think a lot of it is the manufacturer is unwilling to, I think what it is, like you said earlier, it boils down to time. They don't want to educate their techs, right? It's a lot easier for, okay, test light and a multimeter, that's as far as we're going to take you. And we're, the thing with with working for a manufacturer, I find it funny going through the pinpoint testing and being on the other side of it, as opposed to the independent shop. For me, I always went into work with the mentality, especially, like my background is, for those of you who don't know, I was in the industrial trade. I've been in industrial trades my whole life. When I was in high school, I worked in a sawmill for a subcontractor, so millwright, that type of thing. We were kind of all over the place. I did that for about a year, and then I went into the oil industry. I was there for 6 years, and about 4 years ago, I got into the automotive trade, and I started my career off at a shop that was predominantly electrical. Like, we did not even have lifts in our shop. We worked on the floor, and it was electrical every single day. And to me, like, going from that to, like you said, the mechanical side of things, like I don't understand how guys can. It still blows my mind. Somebody will go out there and Fords, I mean, they're notorious for valve control problems, cam phasers, and this and that, and it hasn't changed since the 5.4. Like, it's all the same. Guys can go out there and start a vehicle and listen to it, and okay, yeah, it needs a set of phasers and chains, and they're willing to pull the trigger on a $3,000 job. Yet those same guys, just like you said, oh, I don't like electrical. You can't see what's going on. You don't know what's pixies dancing around in there. But meanwhile, they're just relying on a couple noises and a little bit of symptoms to pull the trigger on a huge mechanical job like that. Like, for me, I try to steer away from those type of jobs because I don't feel confident enough in my abilities to diagnose them, because you can't, like you said, you can't perform the live testing. You basically you look at your symptoms, you go off of your past experiences, and you roll the dice.
Yep. Yeah. For mechanical problems, I feel like I work my job much more like a doctor would. So basically, you start with a basic diagnostic, right? So I think we charge an hour for regular
Hmm.
diagnostic. So let's say there's a knocking noise in an engine, right? A knocking noise, there's nothing you're going to be able to see on electrical anything. Everything is running
Hmm.
fine. Everything's being picked up. You might be able to discern a slowdown between teeth on a cam wheel or something, but I mean, come on. That's
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
difficult. That's like we're talking about microseconds of difference.
Splitting hairs there. Yeah.
Exactly. So what I do then is I try to isolate, do we have a bottom end noise? Do we have a top end noise? If we have a top end noise, that's basically as far as I can get. I can confirm whether or not it's coming from the timing gear, timing chain, timing belt area or not. And then so that at that point, by the time I've poked around quite a bit, it's probably a half hour, 45 minutes. Then I will go. Basically, I'm going to tell the customer, here's where we're at. I know you have a noise coming from the upper end of the engine, not behind the timing covers. So these cars are known for XYZ. So we can either order the parts for XYZ, or we'll take another 3 hours of your time, tear down the top end, and confirm the diagnostic. Now, if we
Hmm.
confirm the diagnostic, you're going to get a discount on the repair, because if I'm tearing apart the top of the engine, where I would have to do that anyways to do repair X, Y, and Z, it
Yeah.
makes sense that the customer saves a little bit of cash there because I'm not putting it back together. But some customers, even spending that extra hour, let's say a difference between diagnostic and job versus just job, they don't want to do it. They don't
Yeah.
care enough. Like they feel like, no, you know what? An hour is a lot of money, so just do the job, right? And
It's unfortunate.
it's unfortunate, but it makes my job easier because then I have the parts in stock. I open up the head. Okay, so I was right or I was wrong. If I was wrong, then we just order the correct parts, and we're going to tell the customer, yeah, I need it for an extra day. If I was right, then I just do the job, and before lunch, this customer gets their car back. So it's kind of like a give and take, but
Yeah.
basically, you just have to learn that, this isn't your car. You're not the reason why the customer's in this situation. In fact, you're there to help, and take it step by step, right? Don't try to not get overwhelmed by the big mechanical things. Just go one step at a time. If there's literally no way to confirm without tearing down half the engine, well, I'm sorry, Mr. Customer, but that's how it's done, right? We have no choice. So I try not to let the mechanical stuff get to me too much, slow down my workflow. I just do kind of step by step like that.
Well, and that's the thing too. And I think that just comes with experience and being comfortable um, with being confident in your diagnostic abilities mechanically. Like I said, I had very little experience with mechanical diagnostic going into the dealership. That was actually a big reason why I had made the switch. Like up until about a year ago, the only time I'd ever done an alignment or mounted a tire was in the classroom. We just didn't do it where I was working, but I felt like it was important for me to actually go out there and spend some time and learn from guys that were pulling wrenches every day. And that's the one thing. Like I for those of you who are not familiar with my channel, I'm not exactly overjoyed about the dealership environment, but it has been nice to get more exposure to that side of the industry because really, I mean, you look at a modern vehicle, there are so many systems within the umbrella of a vehicle that a lot of guys, like you go to a dealership. I don't know about you guys, but we have an electrical guy, we have a diesel guy, we have a driveline guy, we have a transmission guy, and it's so nice to be able to learn from those individuals that have spent so much time focusing and really honing their skills, that I feel like that's where the dealership environment is so valuable.
We're all generalists at my shop.
Oh,
Aside
no kidding.
from alignments, we had an older gentleman who I think he's now retired. He's been talking about retiring for the last 10 years, but I think COVID, he kind of decided to hang up the shop coat. But basically, he does alignments all day, every day. And so I am very good at a few things. I am pretty good at some things. I am garbage at alignments simply because the only times I've done alignments was like in the classroom when I was
Yeah.
being taught in trade school. And then I had to do practice alignments because the week after I had to teach alignments. So I actually had to come in and do some free hours at the college. We have a Nissan 350Z, which is excellent for
Nice.
teaching alignments on because it has a whole bunch of adjustments. But yeah, I had to basically I had to relearn it because I knew it in principle, but I don't do it for a living. And now that he's retired, I'm happy because I'm actually getting to do some alignments again.
It is it you need, like you said, you got to do a refresher. I'm going through, so 8th of September I go for my final 6 weeks of technical training, and then at the end of that I write my interprovincial red seal and I will be a journeyman. And
Sweet.
I was literally going through my books, and first year we did, or was it first or second year, setting up rear ends, different patterns, contact patterns, stuff like that. And I'm like looking through this, I'm like, I have done none of this. Like in 4 years of doing this, it hasn't come my way. Like there are so many things going on with these vehicles that it just hasn't happened. And same thing with alignments. It's just, if you're not doing them semi frequently, you kind of lose it, because you got, there's only so much space up there, and you got to shift that away for whatever you're doing the most of.
Yep. Replacing VTC actuators and doing useless recalls in my case.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's about the same.
So
Block heater cords and seat backs.
yeah, well, we got a new one now, which is fuel pump recalls. Apparently, there's been a bad chain of fuel pumps, so we actually have to open up
Oh.
the tanks and replace literally just the fuel pump. Not even the whole sending unit. They want us to replace only the fuel pump itself.
Oh, so you got to pull everything apart, all full of gasoline, and get all gross, hey?
Yep. Yep.
Oh.
In the middle of a pandemic, we have to go face first into the customer's seats, basically. So that's
Have you
fantastic.
have you noticed much change as far as the whole COVID situation in your workflow? Like, has your dealership taken it quite seriously, or has it been fairly lax?
Um, a little of A and little of B.
Yeah.
If manufacturers are in it only for the money, I would say that private shop owners are even more so. Like as in like the owner of the dealership. If people don't
Mhm.
know this, but Honda doesn't own Honda dealerships and Ford doesn't own Ford dealerships. They're literally bought by entrepreneurs that they're franchised out, and yeah, those right now the automotive industry is not a great place to sink a massive investment in a $500,000 building, $1 million property, and
Yeah.
$2 million worth of brand new stock. So yeah, they're all about the money. The owners of my particular shop, they've said, yeah, we're doing all this to keep our employees safe. We're upping sanitation. We're upping this or upping that, etc., etc. But it turns out my service manager, so basically as a technician, he's my, I guess the second, I guess the person I would call my boss because he's the one who gives
Mhm.
me time off and whatever. But he, for the first bunch of months, was paying for supplies out of pocket because they didn't want to
Oh
reimburse
my
him.
goodness.
So that's that's a whole different thing. In the automotive industry, like any other industry, you can work for some real good people and you can work for some real bad people. I'm just lucky that my service manager had the head on his shoulders to provide the stuff, even though it was coming out of his own pocket. Because I feel like our old management would have just said, "Oh well, if you guys want it, you're gonna have to pay for it yourself," type thing.
Ridiculous.
How about you guys? Anything change?
It's funny because I live in northern British Columbia, so we're pretty remote at the best of times. And really, up until about the last, I'd say about the last 2 weeks, we've only had one or two cases within, I don't know, like 600 kilometers, like, like very, very sporadic. So there wasn't a huge push, but I know when things initially started coming through and everybody was, really concerned, they did do quite a bit. They laid off some people and they went and started upping the sanitation. But I did notice a bit of a lull through the summer. And then now, I mean, I don't know about where you are. It's the leaves are changing. It's fall now. And it seems like the concern is starting to come back. So we're starting to see the plexiglass shields starting to come up and the more sanitation and a little bit of that stuff. But I think overall it's been a kind of a mixed bag. I wouldn't say my daily job has changed too much. Like we come in, they started using steering wheel covers, which was something that we didn't use before, but they suck. Like you can't see the dash, you can't steer with them. Like they're just huge garbage bags wrapped around the steering wheel. Most of the time I just rip them off. And it's definitely been different for sure, but I wouldn't say it's been a dramatic change.
Yeah, we've had a little bit of change. The biggest change was cut to staff. We had a bunch of staff that basically, in the shop there was almost nothing because we're all flat rate, so we cost them nothing to be there. So we can sit on our hands all day. They don't care because they're not paying us. But they cut the service advisors from 4 to 2. They cut the receptionist from, I think we had like 3 receptionists on rotation, and then we just don't have any. The appointment coordinators, people who book your appointment, we had like 3 or 4, and we have 0. Now, what I feel was the worst change is that our apprentices went from, we had, I think, 3 apprentices that were straight time. They brought back 2, but they forced them to go flat rate, so they wouldn't have to pay them. So basically, yeah, now they're learning on their own, out of their own pocket, basically.
Horrible.
Yeah, so that's kind of grim. I definitely don't agree with the flat rate system in general, but especially when it pertains to apprentices. I mean, trying to learn a profession, and honestly, our profession takes a long time to learn well.
Yeah.
Aside from what people think, but it really does take a long time to learn well. And then these guys, they're trying to pay their rent and they're trying to save up to buy a house, but now they have to be assigned jobs that are way over their heads, and it sucks for them because they don't get paid, and it sucks for me and the other flat rate techs because we have to go help them because we feel bad for them and we don't get paid for the time that we're helping them. So yeah, it's a little dark, but they also have choice. I know we're not the only dealership that forced everyone flat rate, but then again, we're also not the only dealership.
Exactly right. For myself, like we talked, because we're a unionized shop, and when the COVID kind of hit, we had a rotation shift schedule, so we work 4 10-hour days, and then we have 3-day weekends, which was awesome. And honestly, that was a big reason why I went to this particular dealership, because the schedule was so enticing. And due to COVID, they started closing Saturdays to change hours, and we're on a regular 5-day a week schedule now. And guys that had been there for 15 years working on that 4-day week were really unhappy, and the dealership said, well, if you don't like it, you can go flat rate. And it kind of quieted them down. For me, if it came down to it, I've never worked on flat rate in my career as an automotive mechanic. Mind you, it's only been 4 years, just shy of 4 years. If it came down to it, I don't think I would ever go for the flat rate system. I just don't think that it's fair that the individual that's putting the most physical work forward, who's the rubber meets the road, we're the end all be all as far as working with the customer's vehicle, gets shafted with potentially working all day and not getting paid for it, or getting paid for a small portion of it. I think that system is so old and so antiquated that it really does need, I don't know if it's legislation or what it needs, but it's time for it to go.
I think it needs a trade-wide unionization. I think that's the only thing that'll that'll
It's
fix it.
something. It really does. Like uh, it's archaic, really. I mean, it's 2020, and you guys, you look at all the different things that have gone on as far as workers' rights and whatever. And there's the mechanic, the guys in the back that are buying their own tools and spending money on their personal education for their careers, and you're not making a whole bunch of money. You do okay, but it's not outrageous, and you're left holding the bag as far as, oh, well, here comes payday Friday at a bad week, and well, things are going to be tight.
Yeah, in business class, I took a couple business classes in university.
Oh,
Nothing
what do
big,
you
just
do?
more like it was a degree filler. But
Yeah.
basically, the flat rate system, as far as I understand it, is a fantastic way to um, externalize cost and internalize profit. So
Hmm.
by that I mean the biggest cost for almost any business depends on what it is, but mostly, as long as it's not specialized in something very specific, the biggest cost is labor costs, or like just literally paying wages. And the flat rate system is a great way to externalize that, because I mean, I don't know, since you haven't worked flat rate, but I've heard this a lot said to even like the new guys who just started in the shop. They say, well, if you didn't make your hours this week, that's because maybe you were dragging your feet a little bit, right? It externalizes. It says, it's not my fault you didn't make money. It can be like -40 outside in a snowstorm. Takes you an
Yeah.
extra hour to get to work. All the customers cancel, and then they'll say, well, it's your fault you didn't make enough money because that one oil change you did, you could have sold $10,000 worth of work on it, right?
Hmm.
If you had looked a little harder. It's that kind of patronizing thing. So
Yeah.
it's externalizing costs and internalizing profit, because you'll get these biannual meetings where it's like, we hit all our performance target, like our dealership is performing at a great rate, and you think, no, 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 no. I'm performing in a great rate, right? If
Yeah.
it's my fault that you can't bring in customers, it should be my fault that you succeeded too. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Like it just it there's no, I mean, I guess there is some upside for the technician. I mean, if you're really good and you're getting the right type of work, and you got the right connections, but there's not a lot of upside for the guy that's holding the wrench. It's the big multinationals, or the millionaires or quasi millionaires that are running these dealerships. Those are the ones that are really benefiting from this system. But the guys that are actually living off of it, they're, it's, I don't agree with it. I really don't.
Yeah, and some places do it so that the technicians make more money, and some places do it really well. Other
Hmm.
places not so much. And I'll say that I'll just leave you with this one thought on flat rate. Is in my shop, everybody who's worked there, their salary has gone down year after year, or stayed stagnated year after year, and it's becoming a lot harder to earn the same amount of money as you did before, because
Hmm.
I mean, especially in a dealership where you have warranty work. So basically,
Oh,
the manufacturer makes a mistake, and because of that, they pay you less to fix it, because they say, well, you're going to be working on 1,000 of these this month, so it's up to you to get quick at it. But at the same time, their labor rates, just for everyone to know, there's like a standard book time, like a company like Mitchell or Pro Demand or whatever. They're going to have like a standard book time, which is what a customer would pay for X, Y, and Z job. Then there's a warranty time, which is typically about 30 to 40% less than that. Same job, but it pays 30 to 40% less. Then if it's a technical service bulletin, they'll typically pay even less than that, because they'll say, well, it's a common problem, you're going to see it a lot, so just deal with it. And then there's a like a recall or a product update time, which is even less, because it's a forced mandatory thing. Everyone's going to come in for it, so you're going to see even more. So basically, give you an example, 2008 Honda Accord, the piston ring sees in the pistons, and then it burns a lot of oil. I think the Mitchell time is between 22 and 26 hours to basically tear down the entire block, take the pistons out, take the rings out, Um, I think, is it? Yeah, just install new pistons, new rings on the old connecting rods, um, put it back into the block, put it all back together, do an alignment. It's about 22 hours or 26
Yeah.
hours. I don't remember which one. Um, the warranty time is around like 16 hours. So it's already a big drop. But because it was a product update, I think it went down to about 8.5.
Oh,
So yeah, there were guys who were really good at it, and they honestly they re and re a whole engine, four pistons, rebuild everything in under 8 hours. They would do it. Like it's
good
tight.
Lord.
It's tight. You're working your
Oof.
butt off, but you do it. But then the car comes back next week, and it turns out you pinched an O-ring when you reinstalled something. So now it's a comeback, and a comeback is typically done off our own backs. We don't get paid for comebacks. So now you got to tear down the block again to get to that O-ring because you were rushing to try to pay your mortgage. So yeah, flat rate. I These days I find that it's much harder to justify flat rate, but it seems really easy to justify for like a business owner, for example.
And that's the thing. It's so funny because I talk to guys mostly in the States that are on the system, and they do well. I mean, mind you, they've been there for however long, and they're a little bit higher up the food chain. They can be a little bit more selective about the work that they get. And they're like, well, how do you weed out the lazy people? It's like, well, I'll be honest with you. This trade does a pretty good job of doing it, regardless of whether you're on the flat rate system or you're getting paid hourly. You can't you're not going to get paid forever sitting around and doing nothing. And that's the thing that always really upsets me is, but like you said, the mentality of, oh, you didn't make your time this week, or you're coming up short, or this took longer than it's supposed to, and it's down to the technician. Meanwhile, like I've had recalls. I mean, we've had tons of them. We work on a lot of Ford pickups. They had a massive block heater recall. They were burning down like you wouldn't believe, and they pay like 0.3 or 0.6. Well, like you said, when it's minus 40 out, you got 3 feet of snow on these vehicles. By the time you brush it off, you get the boost pack, you start it up, whatever it may be, bring the thing in, get your parts. There's been times where I have waited 0.6 to get parts for a recall that pays 0.3. And on the flat rate system, that's the mechanic's fault, even though the parts guy comes in hungover and he's dragging his feet around getting you your stuff.
Or the part just didn't come in. The truck,
exactly.
The truck is in a ditch somewhere in Kingston, and guess
that's
what?
Your problem.
Yeah, you have this job part in your bay from the day before, and now all of a sudden, you have to steal the lube guy's bay? Like it just, it's not going to work.
Exactly.
But a big aspect of the flat rate system is your tools and knowing your tools and how to use them. I've noticed you're using a battery operated soldering iron. Do you still use that thing?
I went from my old job, my old boss, and I'm still really close with him. The guy he's a genius. I honestly believe that I'm not a big fate guy, but for some reason I feel like he was kind of I was meant to cross paths with him. He's into 3D printing and Arduinos and electronics. Like you wouldn't believe. Like the guy is just extremely smart. And we use the corded Weller soldering irons. They didn't like the butane irons. They had guys in the past that would go. And I'm still to this day not a huge fan of the butane irons. So they were using the plug-in irons. And what happened was Weller moved their manufacture from the U.S. to China, and like literally the tips that we were getting, we'd get them out of the package, plug them in, and they wouldn't work, or they'd be destroyed the next day. So he built this. We found just a T20 or a T15 soldering station off of Amazon, and slapped a 18 volt or 20 volt lithium ion battery to it, and I used that for 2 years at my last job. In this particular at the dealership, I did use it for about 3 or 4 months, but I liked it so much for doing stuff at home that I just kept it at home, and I made the switch to the butane iron, and that's pretty much what I use as my daily driver. I don't nearly do the full, harness rebuilds and upfits and lights and stuff that I did at the other dealer, or at the my old job. So it works, but yeah, the electric irons, at least for me, that's where it's at.
I'm never going back to untemperature controlled irons. I mean,
Right?
non-temperature controlled and lead free, those are things that are never going to be in my vocabulary anymore.
It's archaic.
Yeah, so you actually have access because Junk from Work is a patron of mine. So
I
Junk from
am.
Work has access to the latest mailbag video, in which, spoiler alert, I bought myself a TS100.
Oh, really?
Yes, I
Have you had a
feel,
chance to use it?
yeah, a little bit, just doing the video. I feel guilty using Patreon dollars to buy something so
Worth
exquisite.
every penny.
You know what? Just 10 minutes of playing with it, and the only thing I don't like is it's very, very small.
Hmm.
But 10 minutes of playing with it, and man, this thing is great.
Get
So
out of town. Guys have been talking about it for some time, and I've had a few guys approach me just privately because I do a lot of soldering stuff on my channel, and I didn't realize that was such uh, a skill. Like it's gluing wires together with molten metal, but like guys are fascinated by soldering. It's just something that's not really ever talked about. But yeah, like apparently those things are where it's at.
so I'm going to be careful because I haven't played with it enough, but I
Hmm.
would hazard a guess to say that this could be my main iron. It's
Oh man.
it's very nice. I have this sort of mental obsession right now about building a sort of like a briefcase or something like that, like a small tool case that I
Hmm.
can bring anywhere with me. Like I can just easily throw into, like, underneath, basically underneath, like the driver's seat of a car, right?
Yep.
And have all the electrical diag tools that I would ever need. And
Okay.
for that, a soldering iron, how many times have I gone and soldered, like outside, or even in the shop? Like I had to, run an extension cord into the trunk of some car. But this thing, I'm telling you, there's a few things to figure out. Like I need a more flexible power cable for it. I've used a
Hmm.
laptop adapter, so it's kind of stiff.
Okay.
And I need a stand for it because it doesn't like
Yes.
sit on anything. Like basically
Yes.
the iron is the heaviest part of it, so just it always wants to sit on the iron.
Melt the crap out of stuff.
Yeah, but I think, a nice 3D printed stand with a little bit of copper pipe to handle the heat,
That's
um,
it.
and a nice flexible cord, and then you can either use it on any literally any power tool battery, because the voltage range is up to 24 volts, I think.
Oh, nice.
And you can also use a laptop adapter because a laptop is about 19.5 volts. The TS100, I'm telling you, this thing is pretty awesome.
I might have to pull the trigger on one of them. I got the Snap-on, well, because I won't pay tool truck prices, so I went on the Snap-on truck and I said, well, he quoted me on a butane iron, and it was ridiculous. It was like $300 or something.
My
I'm not
God.
paying that. And he had one that somebody had warrantied out, and the switch was broken on it. He's like, I'll give it to you for $50. Even then, I thought that was pretty steep. And I ended up picking it up, and I just JB welded the switch up, and it works okay. But like I said, it feels so archaic, like especially when you're working, because like I use shrink tube for everything. So if you have multiple wires in a tight harness and you got a lot of shrink tube hanging out there, those butane irons throw a lot of heat away from the tip. I mean, they're literally like a hot air gun going off behind the tip. So it can be a bit of a pain. So yeah, I would love to make the switch back to electric. So if that turns out to be something, I might have to pull the trigger on one of those.
If you don't mind the slightly slower warm up time, I think the warm up time is like multiplied by like time and a half, but you
Okay.
can actually run it off an accessory socket in a vehicle.
Oh, no kidding.
It runs
Hey.
down to 12 volts, no problem. Yeah.
Mm.
So
I,
the thought of using a customer's own battery to do their repairs, that just
that's
tickles me in
pretty.
the right way.
That's pretty tasty. I mean, you're the type of guy who won't use an electric tool because he doesn't want to pay for the electricity to charge it. So having
No, it's the wear on the batteries, you
that's
know.
it, right?
I
Um,
have been thinking, like obviously I've just in my old age I'm getting lazier and lazier. So, you're talking about a guy who uses a impact gun to change batteries just because my trigger discipline is amazing, like
I can
honestly.
imagine.
And B, why the hell would I buy another tool when this one does just fine? I just tighten it by hand, but like
Hmm.
the standoffs or whatever, the hold downs, like there's like 80 threads before you hit the bracket. So like you just zip it
Oh
until
yeah,
it stops, right? The momentum, it'll stop, and then you just give it a little twang with your hand, and you're good to
done and
go.
done.
But I have been looking at rigid impact drivers simply because the
Whoa,
batteries are guaranteed for life here.
whoa. The thing that I find funny too is because we talked about this a long time ago is you don't run a lot of electric tools, and you did that video on the Makita knockoff. And is that your biggest video to date on your channel?
It is.
Isn't
Well,
that, I mean, isn't that ironic? As Alanis Morissette would say, isn't that ironic?
yep, yep. It's the battery itself, right? The BL18 clone thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a huge video, brought in a lot of growth. And you know what? It's stupid because I like 18650s. I like lithium ion batteries. I like
Mhm.
messing with them. But when it comes to tools, like an air tool will cost you like a fifth of the price, and it'll last
Oh,
you forever. Like I think the only air tool I've replaced so far would be my die grinder, like with the buffing disc on it.
yeah.
And you know what? It gave up the ghost. I brought it home. I bought a new one, and then I tore apart the one I had, and it had turns out it's just one of the roll pins wiggled its way loose. So I put the roll pin back in, tighten it back up, and it's fine. So these things about, especially when you look at AVE tearing down drills, and they're all made like trash. I don't feel like paying $300 for a brushless piece of garbage.
They really do charge a premium. Like I have the Milwaukee cordless stuff, and it's funny that it's so weird how that it's so divisive. There's the air tool, the old school, smoking cigarettes and drinking whiskey at work, and then there's the modern kids with their crystallized methamphetamines and their electric tools. And for me, like it's nice to have the option for both. Like there's no way in hell that I would give up my air impact. There is just the way it delivers power and torque is so much more manageable and predictable than the electric stuff. Yet on the other side of that, my little stubby, lithium ion impact is another tool that I couldn't live without. Like you said, the battery technology has come. It's quite impressive, but man, do you ever have to pay for it?
Oh, absolutely. And I just want to be clear here. I am the one teacher at my trade school telling the guys that it's not the end of the world, the students, it's not the end of the world if the V8s are going to be discontinued, because electric motors are better in every single imaginable way. Like, a car enthusiast does not have to worry about future cars being boring. Trust me, electrical motors are way more fun than gasoline engines could ever be. They just have to be implemented properly.
That's the
And
thing. I'm in the same boat too, and it's so weird. I don't understand the pushback. Well, in my area, it makes sense because we're, backwoods hicks here, but I don't understand what the phobia against the electric car is. I mean, I think that to me as a consumer, not even as a mechanic, I would be pushing for the electric car more than anything. Scrap all this emissions nonsense, and every single year they're legislating more and more and more. No, let's just make an economic, reliable electric car for the consumer. Let's make the Model T of the electric car. That's where I get excited for the future of this industry.
Yeah, me too. Literally, you need a rolling platform with, let's say, 4 seats, but you can make a 2 seat in a trunk, whatever. It doesn't
Why
matter.
not?
Rolling platform, 2 seats, air conditioning, because let's face it, global climate change has hit us freaking hard. I was freezing today, and it was 24 degrees outside, 24 Celsius. That's because
for that.
it's been 34 for the last like month or two. But
toasty.
yeah, but all you need is a rolling platform, single motor, maybe planetary gear set in there, big bank of batteries, and people will buy it and people will drive to work in it. Like, I don't know about you, but I can actually, when I go for a walk in the morning, I can see everyone going to work, and they're all going to work in these like lifted pickup trucks, and we live in the city.
Oh, man.
And these big trucks, like let's say like an F-350 diesel, has a single person sitting in it. And I understand if you like your F-350, honestly, good on you. It's not my issue. But if you don't want to take public transport, you should have a little electric runaround. Like, and I'm not saying that, you have to, you should have a $30,000 car for work and a $100,000 car for the weekends. What I'm saying is that $30,000 car should really be like a $6,000 car.
I could not agree with you more. And I think that's where I'm starting to get kind of disenfranchised with the industry, especially being at the dealership. You see all these new vehicles. I did a PDI on a half-ton truck today that was over $80,000, and they get more expensive than that. And I think to myself, like, what are you actually using this for? Like, what do you need to spend this money on? Like, why can't I just get a means of personal transportation that has, brakes, three wheels, four wheels, whatever it may be, and some heat for the wintertime? And if that's what I choose to drive, let me drive that. And I don't have to put fuel in it. And I don't have to deal with all the maintenance and everything that goes along with it. And hey, if you want to make these exotic gasoline powered vehicles, go for it. But the electric vehicle for the consumer, for personal transportation, that's the way forward. People need to start getting excited about that.
Oh yeah. And what's not to get excited about? I mean, in the 90s, everybody was excited for these little Japanese hatchbacks, like the Hondas and the Toyotas, the SIs, the Type Rs, the XRSs.
Mm-hmm.
Even Toyota had some really cool, especially in Japan, some really cool 4-wheel drive 2-seater cars. And people were excited for it. And don't say that the domestic guys didn't have their own play on that. There was the SRT4. There was Ford had like the Focus. It was
ST or RS or something like that.
Well, ST here, RS in Europe, but like
Cobalt,
yeah, Cobalt SS, exactly. Like, these cars, they're small, not so small on the domestic end. I think they're a little bit bigger because, let's face it, Americans, they need a little bit more space for their big gulps.
Amen.
But those were exciting cars. Why? Because you can go 60 kilometers an hour, or like, I don't know, what's that, 35 miles an hour, and drive this thing at the limit of its grip, right? In the corners, you can take really sharp corners really well and in control, and the cops would just laugh at you because you're not even going the speed limit yet. They were fun. And you know what? I maintain that muscle cars were only fun because they were out of control. Have you driven one?
Exactly. I've driven a few, yeah, like overpowered stuff. Like I've had the opportunity to drive some pretty interesting stuff in my day. But yeah, the only time a muscle car is ever fun is when you're spinning the rear tires, because really the steering is absolutely horrific.
It's vague.
The road holding is non-existent, but you got 450 horsepower and you got little tiny vinyl tires out back, and you can roast the hell out of them, and that's it's cool. But to me, I think you get older, you kind of develop a different taste for what you're into. For me, when a vehicle really gets exciting is from like 20 kilometers an hour to about 80 is when you really stab on it and you get that, that feeling where it hits you in the chest. And that's where the electric vehicles really, really shine, is that low down torque with lots of get up and go right off the line. And I can imagine in 10 years time what the Ford Focus EV was looking like. I know guys like at the dealership, at the Ford dealership, when they came out with that Mach E, the Mustang or whatever, the electric Mustang, people were up in arms. Oh, this is not a Mustang, this and that. Honestly, that's the most excited I've ever been about a Mustang, was the electric one, because it's different, it's exciting, it's moving forward. It's a different sensation of speed than the normal lazy lumbering V8 that you need 10 gears to utilize the torque, and it's 30% efficiency thermodynamic wise. Like, they're just it's time to move on.
And how much fun can you really have in a 500 horsepower vehicle if your
Exactly.
traction light is flashing at you 24/7?
Well, that's it. Like, analog vehicles are dead. We're at the point now where essentially gasoline vehicles, they're just electric vehicles. They're all digital. They brake for you, they accelerate for you. There's no real physical connection between the driver and the road. It's all controlled by electronics. So let's get rid of that. And listen, like I said, I worked in the oil industry for 6 years. There's plenty of uses for fossil fuels outside of burning them for personal transportation to go to work.
Oh, 100%. Where do you think roads come from?
Exactly, right? I mean, you got plastics, you got roads, you got this. And it's so funny that people associate the vehicle, the gasoline vehicle with the fossil fuel industry. Quite frankly, the passenger vehicle is a very, very small part. Industry consumes more of the refined fossil fuels than anything else. I mean, the products that we use. Yeah. But why is there so much pushback for the electric vehicle? I don't understand. I think it's just consumers that are set in their ways and don't really understand the potential, not only power wise, but reliability wise. I was having this discussion with a couple guys at work. I said, think about how complex a modern valve control system is. I mean, a good, VCT system working in conjunction with direct injection, your fuel and air control. It's mind-blowing. You're talking hundreds of different components that are machined within thousandths of an inch that have to be working in, at 6,000 RPM in complete synchronicity, as opposed to an electric motor, which is basically one moving part. Why are we fighting this as technicians even?
Yeah, honestly, I think it's just ignorance and want for the olden days, right? It's a silly nostalgia that doesn't have to exist. Like, trust me, I mean, I'm too young to have experienced carburetors as a professional technician.
Yes,
I'm
thank God.
Yeah, I'm too young, but I had the opportunity to work with some fantastic people, and I would argue I had the opportunity to work with at least a few of like people that, if we looked at the trade as a whole, I think they would make the list for the top 100 thinkers of the trade, of all time. Probably I'd say at least two of them, and one of them. He was very rough around the edges, came from the Maritimes, it was no BS, this guy, right?
Yeah.
And
He's
he said,
and boys, and yeah,
and he said, oh, the days of the carburetor, you're lucky you missed it, because always you'd have a car on the hook, you'd pull it into your bay, you'd push it into your bay, you'd lift the hood, and there would be screwdrivers. All, like, the air filter would be taken off, and there'd be screwdrivers in the air filter housing. And he said, you know what carburetor stands for? It's French for leave it the fuck alone. That's what he would say, because Every time the car would like make the smallest sputter, someone would go and twiddle the jets on their carburetor, and then the
Yeah.
car would never run right until you bring it to the shop. Trust me, folks, carbureted cars are not a good thing. I equate them to rotary engines. If you want to do it as a hobby, go nuts. But you do not want the general population driving a rotary engine,
God,
nor
no.
do you want them to have a carburetor. If you, how many times has your neighbor messed up his lawnmower, guys? Just think about it.
It, it's so funny, like these. And you know what? I think even the old school guys are starting to renege a little bit on the carburetor stuff, but we did work a little. Like I've worked on flathead Fords, I've worked on older muscle cars and stuff like that, and I've been very fortunate. Like we've had, man, like Ram Chargers and everything, all the way from the 30s to modern stuff, and carburetors suck. Like they're just the worst. Even the way they drive, and I think it's just so much. It's been romanticized so much, and either mechanically, I guess they're mechanically simple that the general population can wrap their head around it.
They're
But
not.
they're not.
A
No,
lawnmower
they're
one is.
mechanical computers. I mean,
They are.
there's so many things going on in there, and it's like, why would you ever like go out and try and start something carbureted in -20, not even -40, in -20, and defend that technology?
Exactly.
You can't do it.
And you know what? Even if your customer decided to mess with their carburetor and they unplugged two of the vacuum lines, which by the way are identical, and then plugged them back in the wrong spot, which by the way they have the same bends in them so they look like they fit. I mean, you could be chasing that issue for hours.
Exactly.
Anyways, carburetors, trust me, you guys don't want that.
I truly hope that I don't want to say 10 years time, but maybe in 20 years time, we will be looking at the internal combustion engine kind of the same way that we're looking at the carburetors now. Like why, what do you mean? You go into your vehicle and you'd warm it up? I can just go in my phone and I can say, oh, I go to work at 6 o'clock, turn the heater on and warm this thing up for me. Like it's time to move past it's overdue as far as I'm concerned. Like, why are we fighting this so hard?
And as a person who's dabbling in Arduino, I would say I'm getting there. I'm not
Oh man.
I'm not great. I know for someone that has fewer skills than me, I look like I'm amazing, but honestly, I am just scratching the surface. But the idea that we need to actually drive our own vehicles seems absurd to me. It seems absurd that a dum-dum like me, like honestly, guys, I am telling you, I literally go look up examples. Like I'm not good at this. However, I guarantee you, if I spent 7 work days, we'll do work days, like 8 hours a day, on trying to make a robot to navigate a maze without touching any of the walls, I guarantee you, for less than $80 Canadian, I will build that robot and it will function. So honestly, I'm not an intelligent person when it comes to programming. I haven't done a lot of it. If I can do it, what does that mean for teams of engineers like that work at Tesla, that work at Boeing? Our airplanes are all autopilot.
Exactly.
All of them, all of the passenger aircraft have autopilot. Every single one of them.
It's so funny. I had this discussion, another break room discussion with the guys there, and the self-driving tech is, I'm never let a machine drive this. It's so funny. You look at ABS systems, you look at traction control systems, you look at power steering systems. We have machines pretty much controlling every single input, a throttle response. It's all controlled by machines. We're the weak link. Obviously, I mean, there has not been a fatality in U.S. aviation, in commercial U.S. aviation in the last decade. You know how many people die on the roads every day from somebody using their cell phone or eating a cheeseburger? Why the fuck are we not pushing the self-driving tech? I think that there needs to be, similar to the way that Canada was founded, by developing their railroad system. We need smart highways that have good feedback to the, obviously we need to work on standardization throughout the whole industry. That's going to be huge. Develop roads that will allow manufacturers to build this self-driving tech, and let's start saving lives. Like you said, driving to me is one of, you look at the greatest minds in history. Albert Einstein was a great example. He rode a bike everywhere. Driving a vehicle around is stupid. It's just you're a piece of meat turning a steering wheel. Let's move past that and really treat personal transportation for what it should be. Make it fuel efficient, make it compact, make it reliable. And then on the weekends, if I want to get out the 68 Charger with my 2-barrel carb spitting fuel out the back, hey, more power to you. There's more fossil fuels to go around because I'm doing something else with it. But I think that the self-driving tech is so important, especially given population growth and density of cities and highways. Especially you look at the United States or places like Japan and China. How in the hell? I mean, we can't even organize half the time. We can't even organize a 2-man parade, and you're going to get millions and millions of vehicles on the road operated by people that are distracted, that are inexperienced, that aren't confident. They have
Absolutely. And you know what? I want the viewers right now to pull out a map of North America. I want you to take a look at the size of Canada, and I want you to take a look at the size of California. Okay, Canada's about 35 million inhabitants, and California has more. So places like California make sense for self-driving. It just makes sense. So I only really have a couple more things that I wanted to go over with you.
for sure.
So you were talking about your computer. Can you tell me what excites you in the computer space?
Oh man, what doesn't? I think going forward, I feel really fortunate because I was born in 1990. So growing up, especially in Canada, I was a little bit further behind here. But seeing, going from libraries and payphones to where we are now is mind blowing in the course of 30 years. In 30 years time from now, I think the biggest thing that we're going to start seeing is the quantum computing is going to start being more. I don't want to say necessarily accessible for personal computers, but man, we have come such a long way in a relatively short amount of time that the future for computers and for AI and even stuff with the biomedical engineering that's going on right now with 3D printed organs and potentially uh, you know mechanically powered organs, hearts and things like that it's extremely exciting.
And open sourcing and the maker movement.
Oh,
Engineers basically doing what they don't like during the day, so they go home and develop like prosthetics for people in need, and open source It's incredible.
I really do feel fortunate. I almost wish I was born a little bit later. But the one thing I will say is, and I've said this on my channel before, it's so mind blowing to me that I would have killed, even going through high school. Like I didn't have a actual full blown computer until I was 17 years old, which was late. I mean, I was quite behind I have older parents, but I would have killed to have the access to information that I have in my pocket. Yet everybody's walking around stupider than ever. Like it's just so crazy that people don't utilize the resources that we have in our modern technologically advanced integrated society to educate themselves to further like the amount of information that I have gotten just from watching even channels like yours. And I mean, you're nothing special.
Yep,
Even watching
you're
channels
right.
like yours, just having that outlet to communicate with like-minded individuals that are interested in things. It, I feel very fortunate that we're able to be living in the time that we are now. And going forward, I truly feel that technology will be, and I'm getting a little esoteric, but technology will be our only humanity's only savior. I think that a few years ago, I don't know if you remember, in Egypt, they were going through kind of the revolution. There was a lot of civil war and stuff going on.
Yep.
And I'm not a big social media guy, which is hilarious because I have a YouTube channel. But the one good aspect about social media is it humanizes everybody. It brings the human experience to your pocket. I can see what somebody's doing in Syria in their day-to-day life. And I think that's so important for humanity going forward that like I said, technology is going to really play a role as far as potentially, world peace and building a society that is sustainable.
Yeah, this is very true. Keeping in mind, obviously, that social media is a tool and it can be used for good and for bad. So I wouldn't, if I have some listeners out there that take a lot of stock in people's Instagram feeds, just be aware that some of those are highly edited. And some
Oh
people
yeah.
put a lot of work into those posts to make themselves appear better than they seem. I mean, even my YouTube channel, the videos you watch, I mean, some of them are pre-coded. Like I will write the code. It'll take me about an hour, and then I show you the finished code. So some of you might get the impression that I just, sort of just danced my fingers on the keyboard and the code came to life. But the reality is, everything you see on my channel is hard won unless I explain it, and unless I bring you along for the ride. Like it's hard fought for. It's not
Mm-hmm.
given to me. But yeah, you're right. I think technology will be our savior, and it's up to us to be the shepherds of technology.
And that's the thing. I saw an article, and it really, it really upset me. They were talking. I think it was oh man, I can't remember where I actually read it, but they did a poll of Canadians, and they said 60% of those polled viewed science as elitist, and that was one of the most depressing things that I have ever read in my life. I mean, you look at what made this country great, what made the United States great was really focusing on the sciences and the scientific methodology and technology. That's when we were at our finest as a society, as a civilization. And I feel like now that people have grown up with it, they're starting to take it for granted, and they don't appreciate how special, how incredible it is. I mean, even the simple act of going into your pocket and being able to talk to anybody on the planet. I still sit down and think about that today. I will take a couple minutes and really contemplate that as incredible. I mean, that is as close to a miracle as you're going to get in modern society. It's unbelievable. And people don't even give it a second thought anymore. It's sad.
Well, look, we're podcasting together, and if I were to drive to your house, I believe it would be about 22 hours of constant driving, maybe a little bit
That
more.
sounds about right. About 5,000 kilometers. Yeah,
It's
that sounds about right.
and we're podcasting as if we're sitting next to each other. Like I haven't even seen you in real life.
Oh man.
So
Yeah, we just had a bit of a power dip here.
Okay, getting scary.
Yeah, it's getting a little scary. I really do appreciate you having me on. This has been incredible. We'll have to definitely get together and do this again.
Yeah, I actually want to talk about the electronicifying of cars in a future podcast. If you'd be up
Yes,
for that.
I definitely agree. I think that is something that we could definitely go on about. I think I wanted to talk about that too, but obviously nature had a bit of a different idea.
So quickly before you have to go, tell the listeners where they can find you, what you do, and yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, you can check me out on YouTube, Junk from Work. I'm also on Instagram. I'm spending a lot more time on Instagram actually right now than I'm spending on YouTube. It's daily snapshots of what I'm doing at work and some of my personal hobbies. It's junk_from_work. So if you want to check me out, a little bit of a more intimate view of junk from work, you can find me there.
And guys, truly, even if he wasn't here, even if I was talking to somebody else, I would recommend you go check out his stuff. And he also forgot to mention that he has a Patreon. So if you want to
Oh yeah,
support
that's
the
right.
stuff that he does, head over on Patreon, throw $1 into the cup. It goes a long way. I have a Patreon as well. And honestly, podcasting, I'm looking into it. Pretty expensive. So it's going to be covered by my Patreon patrons. So I want to thank you all for coming in and listening to us rant about automotive stuff for the last hour and a half or so. And I hope to catch you on the next one. Thanks for listening.
Have a great one.